Hello and welcome to NTD News Today. I'm Evelyn Lee. Here are top stories today. 2 states are trying to make President Biden bring back a Trump-era immigration policy. They say the law is on their side and the administration is dragging its feet. A global microchip shortage is further forcing down auto production numbers. The White House has called for aggressive action, saying the situation is getting worse. For military members, getting a religious exemption from taking the COVID-19 vaccine may be harder than we think. The Pentagon is warning chaplains to watch out for troops who may want to avoid the vaccine by applying for a religious exemption. Air rage incidents are down 50% from earlier this year, but still high compared to last year. We look at a policy change that made the difference. Texas and Missouri are trying to make the Biden administration reinstate the Remain in Mexico policy. The states accuse Biden's team of stalling after the Supreme Court ordered the policy to be restarted last month. NTD's Jessica Beatty reports.
Texas and Missouri are seeking a court order to force the Biden administration to reinstate the Remain in Mexico policy. Last month, the Supreme Court ordered the administration to bring the policy back. But the 2 states accuse Biden's team of ignoring the order. Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton writes, "I've already sued this administration and won, yet they still think they're above the law and can continue shirking their responsibilities." The policy requires some people seeking asylum to stay in Mexico while they await immigration proceedings. The administration says there have been delays in restarting the program. And Mexico is increasing vigilance at the U.S. border. Agents approaching Haitian immigrants camping in a border town near the Rio Grande. They're offering to transport immigrants to southern Mexico, where they can apply for refugee status.
We came here to help them because the U.S. is deporting them to Haiti. We are trying to prevent that. We are just giving them that option.
But many at the camp are skeptical about the offer.
They're saying this to sweeten our ear, to make us fall in a trap so they can do their job. No one believes a word they say.
The camp on the Texas side is noticeably smaller after U.S. authorities ramped up efforts to remove the immigrants.
Wolf, we have indeed removed approximately 1,400 people.
Secretary of Homeland Security Alejandro Mayorkas says those being placed in immigration proceedings have medical conditions or vulnerabilities. He says it also depends on capacity.
This is not a matter of immigration policy, but rather this is a matter of public health policy.
House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy blames the surge of immigrants in Del Rio, Texas, on Biden's policies.
Their journey is a direct result of the Biden-Harris agenda that wants to grant them amnesty and a lifetime of government benefits.
McCarthy said over 1.2 million immigrants have been apprehended since Biden took office. Jessica Beatty, NTD News.
And Biden announced just now there will be repercussions for Border Patrol agents over their treatment of Haitian migrants, saying it's an embarrassment to the nation. That's over photos showing agents on horseback apparently using reins against the migrants. Still, Biden added that he ultimately bears responsibility for the situation at the Texas border with Mexico. The so-called Quad Summit is set to get underway at the White House in the coming hours, made up of 4 countries who share a wary view of China's expanding influence in the Indo-Pacific. Let's take a look at how the new AUKUS agreement plays into that.
A warm Washington welcome for Australia's Scott Morrison, now firmly in Joe Biden's inner sanctum, as the White House focuses foreign policy on countering the perceived threat from China.
The United States has no closer or more reliable ally than Australia.
Reliable enough to be trusted with the closest of secrets, nuclear-propelled submarine technology. New weapons of war the US and UK will help Australia build as a powerful deterrent to China.
Mr. President, I want to thank you for your leadership and your focus on the Indo-Pacific region. There's no doubt that you get it.
What's to get is a sense of the pain that China has inflicted on Australia through blocks and tariffs on exported products from wine to coal. Economic punishment, Australia says, for defying Beijing.
Beijing calls Australia an upstart, an ungrateful upstart, and what it means by that is it is a small country which it hoped would become more of a neutral state which has moved against Beijing.
John Lee is a former advisor to Australia's foreign minister. He says China has worked hard to try to pull Australia away from the US. A free trade agreement between the two countries in 2015 supercharged Australian exports. But Australia has pushed back against alleged Chinese interference in its domestic politics and angered China by calling for an independent inquiry into the origins of COVID-19. Intentionally or otherwise, Australia has become a global example on how to resist Beijing.
I think what's also enraged Beijing is that a lot of other countries have taken inspiration from Australia on policies such as banning Huawei, on foreign interference legislation, even strategic affairs.
Australia has earned a central role in US efforts to counter Chinese aggression, from threats against Taiwan to the militarisation of the South China Sea. And China's reaction to the submarine deal was swift and sharp.
Cooperation on nuclear-powered submarine technology between the US, the UK and Australia will gravely undermine regional peace and stability.
Biden and Morrison joined Friday by Prime Ministers Narendra Modi of India and Yoshihide Suga of Japan. The four call themselves the Quad, brought together by one common concern, a more aggressive China. Australia's place in the Quad and its AUKUS deal with the US and UK now threatening to transform the upstart into a new competitor for Beijing.
A pandemic-led global microchip shortage is forcing more automakers to cut production. U.S. Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo has called for aggressive action. She said the situation is not getting better. Let's look at the details.
The global semiconductor or microchip shortage has crippled automakers for nearly a year, affecting thousands of U.S. workers. On Thursday, the White House hosted a semiconductor supply chain meeting in Washington. Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo said in an interview that the ongoing crisis shows signs that it could get worse.
It's time to get more aggressive. The situation is not getting better. In some ways, it's getting worse. Truck companies, car companies have furloughed and continue to furlough thousands of workers.
Raimondo pointed out the lack of transparency in the supply chain, adding that a voluntary request for information sent to the industry this week will provide more information.
By getting more information, we want to get more granular into the bottlenecks and then ultimately predict challenges before they happen.
The United States remains the global leader in designing chips, but is highly dependent on foreign semiconductor supply chains, with roughly 80% of its foundries, assembly, and test operations concentrated in Asia. Aware of the vulnerability, Raimondo called the lack of chip production in the U.S. a national security risk.
We're going to try to do what we can to make incremental change as fast as we can. But the long-term solution will take a while, and that is just making more chips in America.
The pandemic has disrupted chip manufacturing around the world, leading to reduced supply. According to a recent forecast by consulting firm AlixPartners, the shortage will cause an estimated 7.7 million unit drop in vehicle production this year and over $200 billion in lost revenue worldwide.
The House voted to approve the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2022 on Thursday with wide bipartisan support. It's now up to the U.S. Senate to pass its version of the act for the coming fiscal year. The nearly $770 billion defense bill sets policy for the Pentagon on a number of areas, ranging from how many rifles and ships it should purchase to soldiers' salaries to how best to approach geopolitical threats. And after the Taliban takeover last month, it also directs the Pentagon to outline how it will continue to evacuate American citizens and Afghan allied personnel left behind in Kabul. It asks officials to detail how to protect the country against potential terrorist threats, now that the United States no longer has a presence in Afghanistan. House Armed Service Committee ranking member Congressman Mike Rogers says the bill is also laser-focused on preparing our military to prevail in a conflict with China. In the lower chamber, just over 300 representatives opted to support it, and just over 100 opposed it. The conservative House Freedom Caucus led the charge to oppose the plan for military spending and priorities. It says the bill gives a blank check to the Biden administration. And the military's vaccine mandate allows for medical and religious exemptions. But how hard is it to get one? In a memo, the Pentagon is telling Coast Guard chaplains to question the sincerity of troops' faith. Here are the details.
For Coast Guard members who are seeking a religious exemption to the COVID-19 vaccine, the Pentagon is asking chaplains to question the sincerity of soldiers' religious beliefs. For example, the Pentagon tells chaplains to have the member describe how they consistently keep the tenets of their faith and demonstrate those in their daily life. Ask them to be as specific as possible. This comes from a memo the Pentagon allegedly sent to Coast Guard chaplains and made available to the Epoch Times. The memo also tells chaplains if they come to the meeting and begin by discussing concerns about safety, politics, etc., note that in the memo. The memo goes on to warn chaplains to be wary of troops who may be using the religious exemption to avoid the vaccine. It says even if the member eventually states that it is a belief based on religion, note their first expression and how they moved from non-religious beliefs to religious ones. General Counsel of First Liberty Institute, Mike Berry, says such questions are illegal and calls some of them inflammatory and offensive. Berry tells the Epoch Times the government has no authority and no legitimate basis to ask the sorts of questions that are in the memo, and it demonstrates overt hostility to religious beliefs.
Do you ever wonder how much class time students miss in quarantine? Well, they can miss up to 2 weeks, even if they're asymptomatic. That's going by the CDC's policy. But Florida is taking a different approach. They're making quarantine optional for asymptomatic students. NTD's Miguel Moreno has that story.
Governor Ron DeSantis has built up a reputation for his novel approach to dealing with the pandemic. In his latest move, the governor's changed his policy for students exposed to COVID-19.
Quarantining healthy students is incredibly damaging for their educational advancement. It's also incredibly disruptive for families all throughout the state of Florida, but particularly here in Central Florida. And so we are going to be following a symptoms-based approach. If somebody is symptomatic, of course, they stay home. But if a parent has a healthy child, that child has a right to be in school.
He says the parents of asymptomatic students have the last word to send them off or keep them home. Before, everyone in close contact with a COVID-positive student would be sent home for a few days, but students who test positive for COVID must still quarantine. Florida's updated rule differs from CDC guidelines in a few ways. The federal agency exempts fully vaccinated students from quarantine if exposed to the CCP virus. But students who've passed on the vax are asked to quarantine for 14 days, whether they test positive or not. In a statement, the Alachua County Public Schools superintendent said the governor's new rule is likely to promote the spread of COVID-19 by preventing schools from implementing the common sense masking and quarantine policies recommended by the vast majority of healthcare professionals. But the governor says that in Florida,
most of the students who are ordered to go home in quarantine don't end up getting sick.
The state of Iowa has already adopted a similar rule to Florida's. Miguel Moreno, NTD News.
The Biden administration began giving money to some Florida school board members. Their salaries were docked last month for mandating masks after the governor banned such mandates. The Department of Education says it gave almost $148,000 in funding to the school board of Electoral County. Critics of mask mandates argue such rules infringe on personal liberty. Mask mandate supporters say they're necessary to stop the transmission of COVID-19. According to data compiled by Burbio, masks are currently required at schools in 74% of the 200 largest districts around the nation. And the House of Representatives panel formed to investigate the January 6th U.S. Capitol breach has issued its first subpoenas for 4 members of former President Trump's administration. The panel has issued a round of subpoenas for documents and testimony of former White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, former White House Deputy Chief of Staff for Communications Daniel Scavino, former Defense Department official Kash Patel, and former Trump advisor Steve Bannon. The committee's chairman said in a statement that the 4 have close ties to the former president. It says they were working in or had communications with the White House on or in the days leading up to the breach. They're required to appear for a deposition in mid-October. The panel received no backing by members of Republican House leadership. Abortion providers in Texas have urged the U.S. Supreme Court to intervene in their challenge to a near-total ban on abortion in the state. On Thursday, abortion providers filed a petition. It's asking the Supreme Court to hear their case before lower courts finish their ruling on the law, which bans abortion after 6 weeks of pregnancy.
This month, the conservative majority Supreme Court refused to block the measure, which allows private citizens to sue anyone who assists a woman in getting an abortion past the 6-week cutoff. That unusual feature has helped shield the law from being immediately blocked, as it makes it more difficult to directly sue the government. The Supreme Court rarely agrees to hear a case before lower courts have had a chance to weigh in, but several justices have expressed skepticism about how the law is enforced, with Chief Justice John Roberts writing that he would have blocked it, quote, so that the courts may consider whether a state can avoid responsibility for its laws in such a manner. The law can award individual citizens at least $10,000 for bringing successful lawsuits against those who violate the ban. The providers say defending against these lawsuits would amount to, quote, costly and potentially bankrupting harassment, and that the ban has sparked a crisis of Texans traveling hundreds of miles to other states for abortions, causing backlogs there. The Supreme Court is already set to consider Mississippi's 15-week abortion ban on December 1st.
Wisconsin voters are suing over the state's redistricting process. Now it's in the hands of the state Supreme Court. It could lead to the court drawing up the state's new electoral map for 2022, if the Democratic governor and Republican state legislature fail to agree on one. Some Wisconsinites fear that the divided government won't agree on anything and the court may have to do it. Residents say the two branches of state government have repeatedly failed in recent decades to agree on new maps after new census results are released. They view the lawsuit as an insurance policy against the chaos of not having a redistricting plan. A case over Wisconsin's new electoral map is also pending in federal court. A trial is expected in January. The rate of unruly airline passenger incidents has dropped sharply since regulators moved to impose fines in January. But the Federal Aviation Administration says the rate is still twice as high as last year. As of last week, reported occurrences involving unruly airline passengers were 6 per 10,000 flights. That's a 50% drop from earlier this year. But the FAA says even one incident is one too many. They called air rage a serious safety threat. Numbers remain high compared to a year ago as some flyers balked at a federal face mask mandate on airplanes. Hundreds of passengers have been banned from some airlines, and some have faced $9,000 in federal civil fines for defying mask requirements. Airline staff have been on the receiving end of much of the rage, leading some airlines to cancel sales of alcoholic beverages on flights. Airline unions have called on Attorney General Merrick Garland and the Department of Justice to prosecute disruptive and violent air passengers. The New York Taxi Worker Alliance held a rally in New York City in support of taxi medallion debt forgiveness. Much of the New York City's taxi driving business has been greatly affected by rideshare companies such as Uber and Lyft. NTD's Jason Perry was at the event.
Here is called a taxi medallion. It's like a permit that allows taxi drivers to drive around New York City. They used to sell for almost $1 million just a few years ago. But with Uber and Lyft driving around the city, these medallions have lost much of their value, leaving taxi drivers in hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. Taxi drivers gathered today in a rally in support of taxi medallion debt forgiveness.
Without buying the medallion, CD let the Uber and Lyft company took our fare, steal our fare. They sold us, the CD sold us, we lost the investment, we lost the retirement.
In 2009, Chow's brother, Kenny Chow, bought a taxi medallion for $700,000 before the value suddenly crashed.
My brother, Kenny Chow, he very, very frustrated, very upset, and very angry, and I can't tell you now.
His brother was one of 9 taxi drivers who committed suicide in 2018.
Even after the suicides and all the ruin, on the final days of this administration, instead of adopting a plan that will cost this city just a couple $1 million a year extra, which is a fraction of a $96 billion budget, They would rather sell lies than to fix this crisis.
Assemblyman Ron Kim says that New York City taxi drivers are not being treated fairly.
It was a system that socialized the risk for private banks, the big corporations, for the billionaires, but gave you nothing. They took your profits. You, every one of you here, created the wealth of the city, the social, cultural wealth of the city. You deserve everything, not the banks. Yes, that's right.
Assemblywoman Jessica Gonzalez Rojas saw a flyer from 2014 that advertised the taxi medallions.
Somebody shared with me this flyer. It said, "Do you want to own a piece of New York?" This flyer sold our taxi workers a dream. But what they instead did is sell them a nightmare.
We also spoke to some other taxi drivers whose lives have been affected. Suburb Halber has been a taxi driver for 22 years.
Uber coming, Lyft coming, my business going down.
Balkar Singh has been a taxi driver for 30 years.
So bank make money anytime, but we cannot make money. It's very hard for us. So mayor should do something, He can do it. He have power, And Schumer with him, he can do it.
According to New York Daily News, New York City offered taxi medallion owners $20,000 to restructure their debt. But the taxi drivers here said that's only a small fraction of what they owe. New York City taxi drivers on average are $500,000 in debt. New York City taxi drivers are trying to make their voices heard, and they're calling on lawmakers to help them with taxi medallion debt forgiveness. Jason Perry, NTD News, New York.
New stories are emerging about New York City's infamous Rikers Island prison complex. Democrats and Republicans alike agreed that the situation is out of control, but they have different solutions in mind. NTD's Ariane Pastar has more from the entrance to the island.
Just a few yards behind me lies Rikers Island, a prison overflown with inmates but understaffed. In 2019, the city voted to shut the prison down. This week, 4 House Democrats, including Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, wrote a letter to Governor Kathy Hochul and Mayor Bill de Blasio demanding that they shut the prison down. In their letter, they complain about alleged life-threatening conditions. They reported overflowing toilets and floors covered in dead cockroaches, feces and rotting food. At least 12 people have died at Rikers so far this year. The 4 House Democrats want the prison closed and the inmates released. The governor has agreed and ordered the release of over 200 inmates. Now, New York Republicans met at the entrance of the island, saying Democrats are jeopardizing public safety.
We are seeing unsafe streets that are less safe than they were 2 years ago. Why we would want to let people out of jail who rightfully a judge has decided should be here. These are people who have underlying crimes, who were released from jail based on a certain set of conditions and couldn't even meet those conditions.
Joseph Borelli is the minority whip in New York City Council. He says Rikers is obviously in a crisis, but according to him, it's the mayor's fault.
The mayor has failed in his plan to close Rikers and open up community jails. The situation inside is deteriorating, and he abandoned the last mayor's actual meat and potato program to renovate some of the facilities on the island.
He added that the city managed to hire 10,000 additional workers to clean up the city, but seems to fail when it comes to hiring more correctional officers. Ariane Pastar, NTD News, New York.
Up next, an Asian American CEO donates 500 oxygenators to help Vietnam to help with a spike in COVID cases there. The CEO escaped from Vietnam with his family when he was 17 years old. And a former supermodel filed a $50 million lawsuit against a company that gave her fat reduction procedures. She says they left her disfigured and unemployable as a model. More in a moment here on NTD News.
Secure, the true solution for your digital privacy and security. Secure is a private and secure messaging and email solution hosted in Switzerland, using military-grade encryption and Swiss privacy laws, giving you true privacy. Secure is 100% private and does not collect or sell any of your personal data. Secure's Helix technology connects you securely to our Swiss servers without the need of a VPN. guaranteeing privacy and security for all your communications. Secure Messenger doesn't require your phone number or any personal data that hackers target. Chat by Invites allows you to chat privately and securely with anyone outside of your secure network without the need for others to download Secure. Secure Send offers you a private and secure way to email anyone outside of Secure. You won't find this level of privacy or security on any other email or instant messaging application. Visit secure.com. Regain and protect your privacy today.
More than 5,500 acres of forest have been set ablaze after strong winds whipped up the Fawn Fire. It's burning northeast of Redding, California. The fire quickly expanded from around 50 acres on Wednesday and has since burned down 25 structures, according to the California Department of Forestry and Fire Protection. Video obtained by Reuters shows a time-lapse of wildfire smoke blowing towards Redding. That's a city of about 93,000 people. At least 4,000 people have evacuated and an estimated 30,000 residents have been affected. An estimated 1.7 million acres of land have been blackened by more than 6,800 wildfires, large and small, across California this fire season. A Vietnamese-American entrepreneur in Oakland, California, is donating hundreds of oxygenators to help people impacted by COVID in Vietnam. The president of Vietnam is in the U.S. for United Nations meetings and will bring the oxygenators to Vietnam on his return flight. NTD's David Zhang spoke with the entrepreneur behind the large donation.
Vietnamese-American entrepreneur David Duong is donating 500 oxygenators to Vietnam to help people affected by the COVID pandemic. This donation is the largest private donation of its kind. He says back in 2020, he asked the Vietnamese government to buy masks, hand sanitizers, and other equipment from Vietnam to help people in the U.S.
We want to help our community here. Giving out to frontline workers, we giving out to hospital, giving out to community with masks and hand sanitizer.
Now he's donating oxygenators to Vietnam to help local communities there. He hopes the oxygenators can help people manage their symptoms.
So we think about how we're going to help to prevent people that before they get severe and they have to admit to hospital.
According to data from the World Health Organization, Vietnam experienced a spike in COVID cases and deaths beginning mid-July 2021. There are currently over 707,000 confirmed cases and over 17,500 deaths. Duan is working with the Vietnamese ambassador and local governments to facilitate the delivery of these oxygenators.
So what we do is we actually donate it, but we named it to province. That's how many units going to what province.
On Friday, September 24th, the oxygenators will be loaded and flown to Vietnam on the same flight as the Vietnamese president's return flight from the United States back to Vietnam.
Our family started recycling company since 1983, and then until 1991, we changed the company name to California Waste Solution, because back in 1991, the ADA actually all the government in state of California changing the law that they require all the garbage company that they have to recycling.
The company name change allowed it to sign government contracts with Oakland and San Jose. In 2005, Vietnam's Waste Solutions was created to help communities in Vietnam recycle. Duan's parents owned a paper mill in South Vietnam, were already in the recycling industry. At 17 years old, Duan and his family escaped from Vietnam on a boat after the fall of Saigon. Duan and his siblings helped their parents collect recyclable materials every night to sell and save money to start their own recycling business in the Bay Area.
Our job is to helping our parents to fill up the truck. So the next day, we go to school and they can go to the place that where they can sell recycled material.
California Waste Solutions now helps collect recyclable materials on the city level. David Zhang, NTD News, Oakland.
Former supermodel Linda Evangelista has filed a $50 million lawsuit. It's over cosmetic procedures that she says left her brutally disfigured and turned her into a recluse.
In the 90s, the Canadian model was one of the most prominent figures to grace the runway and magazine covers. On social media Wednesday, she revealed she had undergone a treatment for fat reduction with company Zeltic Aesthetics 5 years ago. But she wrote in her post that it had done, quote, the opposite of what it promised. After the procedures, Evangelista said she suffered a rare side effect called paradoxical adipose hyperplasia, which causes people to develop a swelling in the areas that were treated. Zeltic Aesthetics did not respond to requests for comment. The lawsuit against Zeltic was filed on Tuesday in a New York federal court for negligence, misleading advertising, and allegedly failing to warn customers of possible side effects. It also said Evangelista had undergone multiple procedures on various parts of her body between 2015 and 2016. The 56-year-old is now seeking damages for lost income and emotional distress, saying she was now unemployable as a model and has not earned anything from modeling since 2016. Zeltic is a unit of Allergan Aesthetics, a pharmaceutical company best known for making Botox.
Jailed Hong Kong pro-democracy activist Jimmy Lai was recently awarded the Liberty Medal by the National Constitution Center. He was praised for sacrificing his freedom to secure liberty for others. Lai was arrested in August 2020 on charges of violating Hong Kong's new national security law. The law was imposed by Beijing last year to clamp down on the city's pro-democracy forces. The Liberty Medal recognizes Lai's courage in exercising the fundamental rights of freedom of speech. The award ceremony was held online due to the pandemic, and American diplomat James B. Cunningham accepted the honor on Lai's behalf. Cunningham is a former consul general for Hong Kong and Macau. Lai also founded a widely read Hong Kong newspaper critical of the local government and the Chinese Communist Party. That newspaper also ran into trouble and closed after Beijing imposed the national security law. And less than 2 years before the CCP virus pandemic sprawled across the globe, scientists from the Wuhan virus lab were planning to release some gene-edited viruses into bat caves. That's as part of their scientific research, which aimed at making the viruses more infectious to humans. And US-based researchers were also involved.
Some scientists from the US and China's Wuhan were planning to do some risky research before the pandemic. In 2018, they proposed a project to genetically alter SARS-related bat coronaviruses to make them more infectious to humans, as well as releasing engineered viruses into Chinese bat caves. US-based nonprofit EcoHealth Alliance proposed the research to a US military research agency. They asked for over $14 billion in funding. But the US government rejected the idea, saying it could put locals in danger. The US nonprofit is a longtime partner of the Wuhan Institute of Virology, the lab at the center of pandemic controversy. Scientists from the Wuhan lab were listed as partners in this proposal. The plan was part of a document dump by a group of scientists and activists trying to determine the origin of the CCP virus. Chemical biology professor at Rikers University Richard Ebright tweeted out the findings and said the world should be furious at the news. While Alina Chan, a scientist who works at MIT and Harvard, said even though the proposal was rejected, there's a good chance some preliminary research work has already been done. A fact sheet from the U.S. State Department earlier this year reported that the Wuhan lab has been researching virus engineering, but noted that the facility hasn't been transparent or consistent about its record, particularly when it comes to studying viruses similar to the one that causes COVID-19.
Acts of protest and defiance continue in Myanmar, almost 8 months since the military seized power. When the security services can't find the dissidents, they arrest their families instead. It's called collective punishment, and it left a 5-year-old girl behind bars. Here are the details.
A 5-year-old girl sings along to a favourite song. At first glance, a picture of innocence. But Sutet Wang's innocence is gone, taken away by Myanmar's brutal military. Soldiers arrested her along with her mother and older sister because her father, a leader in the pro-democracy movement, was in hiding. Released after 18 days, she spent her 5th birthday behind bars. She is now reunited with her father. Hiding in the jungle, Sote sends us audio clips through his mobile. The young girl says she was forced to stay in a half-sitting, half-standing position, widely considered to be a stress position. The UN Committee Against Torture views stress positions as contrary to the Convention Against Torture.
I've seen reports of infants being abducted. Is just a degree of outrage that it's just hard to put in words. Just how angry I am at the depths that this military junta is willing to go.
We sent the military detailed questions about the girl's detention. They have not responded to our emails or texts.
She's still suffering some mental trauma. She wakes up in the morning crying, saying, "I miss my mum and I miss my older sister. Why aren't they back yet?"
Sote refuses to give up on his fight for democracy, despite his seemingly desperate situation. He says his wife and daughter have been sentenced to 3 years in prison and have been separated from each other. He heard his daughter contracted COVID-19 in prison, but has since recovered.
And still to come, who will be the next German Chancellor? 2 candidates are currently leading the race. We look at who they are and what they promise to do. Find out more in just a minute.
I'm starving. There's a supermarket a block from here. They won't sell me any food. Oh, don't tell me you're one of those fools that didn't take the mark. And this is the end of mankind?
Yes. The final end. The end of mankind. The end of this wretched world. I came as a man of peace and the world bought it. Can you believe that? They even took the mark of the beast. Fools! End-time behavior.
It was so evident. All of us were left behind because in the end we simply didn't care about Jesus Christ.
That's right. Maybe that's why they deserve to spend eternity with Satan and me.
Beyond Facelift MediSpa specializes in delivering non-surgical cosmetic treatments and medical aesthetic services, now featuring Auth therapy, a non-surgical skin tightening FDA-approved procedure. Call 646-306-2348.
Put the keys down, Kevin.
But I'm gonna drive home.
There are several warning signs present that you shouldn't be driving.
My text to emoji ratio has gotten a little out of hand.
A little?
Yep, I'm definitely gonna call a ride home.
Germans will head to the polls this Saturday to elect their next parliament. The day will also mark the end of Chancellor Angela Merkel's 16-year rule. Let's take a look at what Germany has been through during her time in office.
When she was first sworn in as German Chancellor in 2005, Angela Merkel almost lost the election with an ambitious liberal market reform agenda. 16 years later, the country is voting on whether to continue doing things the Merkel way.
Now I think people are looking for a person they can trust in a similar way, along the lines of, they'll do it, we don't have to worry about it. There used to be this bank commercial, live your life, we'll take care of the rest. That's about it.
The first major crisis that Merkel had to deal with was the economic recession in 2008. The crisis in the U.S. real estate market also reached the German banking sector. Bank reports said that large amounts of cash were being withdrawn.
And we tell savers that their deposits are safe, and the German government stands behind that.
The financial crisis later developed into a European debt crisis in 2010. Merkel was reluctant to take the lead in a comprehensive stabilization policy. She shied away from debates on state guarantees in the triple-digit billion range. And by 2012, Merkel regrouped by selecting the European rescue as the cross-party project of her chancellorship.
Europe fails when the euro fails. Europe wins when the euro wins. The euro wins when we create a stability union that actually deserves the name because it is supported by a strong foundation of solidity, growth, and solidarity.
Until the summer of 2015, the euro debt crisis still kept German politics on tenterhooks. Then came the Syrian war and the refugee crisis that exposed deep rifts within the European Union. During this crisis, Merkel defended herself against criticism that she was too friendly to refugees.
I have to say quite honestly, if we now start having to apologize even for showing a friendly face in emergency situations, then this is not my country.
And the last major crisis that Merkel dealt with was the pandemic.
Not since Germany's unification, no, not since World War II has there been a challenge to our country where it depends so much on our acting together in solidarity.
Now, for the first time in Germany's post-war history, a parliament will be elected without a sitting chancellor seeking another term. All voters are faced with this question: who do they trust to be in charge after Merkel?
So Germany will soon have a new chancellor for the first time in close to 16 years. But the big question is, who will it be? Two candidates are most likely choices to win the election. One has Angela Merkel's backing, and the other is from the Social Democratic Party. Here are the details.
German Chancellor candidate Armin Laschet is trying to present himself as the continuity of Angela Merkel's rule, and Merkel also wants him to succeed her. Earlier this month, Merkel pleaded with German voters to back Laschet in a speech in parliament. Both of them are part of the Christian Democratic Union, or CDU.
The best way forward for our country is a government led by CDU and the CSU with Armin Laschet as chancellor, because his government will stand for stability, reliability, moderation, and balance, which is exactly what Germany needs.
Laschet is currently the premier of Germany's most populous state. He hopes his credentials as a manager can compensate for his lack of personal charisma. He also promises steadfastness.
It's about the direction of German politics, which will be decided on September 26th. Growth and prosperity, stability, a balanced budget, domestic and foreign security, and climate protection, while maintaining social cohesion and industrial jobs in Germany.
To appeal to more voters, he tapped a new team to reboot his campaign in early September. But opinion polls show him lagging behind his main rival, Olaf Scholz from the left-wing Social Democratic Party, or SPD.
I ask for your vote, a vote for a good future, and that's why I want to serve your country as Chancellor.
Scholz is currently Germany's Vice Chancellor and Finance Minister. As Finance Minister, he drove efforts to introduce a global corporate minimum tax and new tax rules for tech giants.
Today is an important day. After all, I've been a social democrat since I was 17, so in that sense, it's an uplifting moment.
Scholz promises to increase the minimum wage, tighten rent controls, and maintain high public investment in greener and more digital infrastructure.
You may remember German Chancellor Angela Merkel by her collection of colorful blazers. She always dresses in suit jackets that are the same in shape but different in color. Let's take a look at Merkel's fashion over the past 16 years.
For the past 16 years, German Chancellor Angela Merkel's fashion has been a point of much commentary and amusement for the German people. Merkel once told a newspaper, "For a man, wearing a dark blue suit for 100 days in a row is no problem at all. But if I wear the same blazer 4 times in 2 weeks, citizens write to me."
What should she have worn other than her look? She was always with men. Was she supposed to come in a skirt suit? I think it was good, the way she did it. Now she can wear her necklaces or hang out in her tracksuit.
A couple of times when she attended the annual Wagner Opera Festival in the summer, Merkel appeared wearing a low necktie. That got her onto tabloid front pages. Another time in Norway, the Chancellor went to an Oslo opera house with a plunging neckline. Her outfit quickly sparked a media sensation in Germany at the time.
We are women at the end of the day, and she tried to downplay this as much as possible with her dress style. Matter of fact, comfortable, jacket and trousers, flat shoes, no false coquetry.
For 16 years, Merkel has met global leaders and citizens and attended parliament in an array of smart jackets in the same shape, different in color. A German fashion designer believes that may have set a new fashion trend.
And one has to say that she now worn the trouser suit long enough for its revival. It was gone for a long time and now it is totally trendy again. And if she were to now go for oversized, she will be even hipper.
The fashion designer says it was the right look for Merkel as a chancellor, but he hopes she can relax and dress the way she wants to after she steps down.
In the Monte Mario area of Rome, residents have to be extra careful when taking out the trash. Otherwise, they might get run over by wild boars. Sightings of wild boars trotting along the streets have become the norm for residents. But hordes of animals outside buildings and schools are heating up a major debate ahead of mayoral elections next month. The animals come to the city to rummage for food in parks and garbage bins. Residents complain they're causing car accidents and making everyday tasks like walking to school dangerous. Mayor Virginia Raggi is seeking re-election, but she's struggling to shift responsibility for the capital's most serious issues, including wild animals, poor pavement maintenance, and heaps of trash piling up. Raggi has recently filed a suit against the Lazio region, which includes the Italian capital, saying it's up to the regional administration to solve the issue. The Lazio region denies responsibility. The Boars don't seem to mind the debate, happy with their easy pickings. And a museum in a Western Russian town is showcasing its collection of more than 5,000 spoons. The museum is also uncovering the tableware's early connection to seashells. Here are the details.
Though they feature lavish Rococo designs, these seashell-like artifacts are not jewelry. They're actually aluminum spoons, now displayed at a museum in Western Russia. In the early 19th century, aluminum was even more valuable than gold.
The first aluminum cutlery was made by a jeweler for the French Emperor Napoleon III. At one of the dinners, his family was using the aluminum spoons with pride, while the courtiers, enviously looking at them, used silver ones and gold-plated.
Aside from beautiful antique displays, the museum charts the interesting genesis of the spoon. The tableware came into being thousands of years ago. Prototypes consisted of seashells and halves of nuts. Visitors can also learn about the production of wooden spoons. In Russia, traditional painted wooden spoons are common in every home, with black for every day and red for festivities.
The hostess, when inviting guests to the house, would lay the table with red tableware. When the party was over and guests were leaving, she would say to everybody leaving the wish, "Live for the red spoon." Because for our ancestors, the color red was always special. It was the color of joy, happiness, well-being.
The Spoon Museum holds around 5,000 exhibits from 80 countries. Most are donations.
For us, it is a unique museum because it is being created by all visitors of the museum. Everyone who came to us once tries to bring something interesting to us on their next visit.
Also on display are spoons not meant for food, like shoe spoons, or metallurgical spoons used for scooping hot metal. Around 15,000 tourists visit the museum annually.
The museum is wonderful. The museum is made with love and taste. We understand that these are people searching for something new, who find such wonderful things. I am just delighted.
The Spoon Museum opened in 2003 as part of the local history museum. The oldest spoons in its collection date back to the 7th to 9th centuries AD.
Divers have discovered treasure off of the east coast of Spain. A university there announced Tuesday that dozens of Roman coins were recovered near a small Spanish island. Two amateur freedivers first discovered 8 coins back in August. Archaeologists later dove even further and returned with 45 more. The find is one of the largest collections of Roman coins in Europe. Scientists date the coins back between the 4th and 5th centuries and say they're perfectly preserved. And on this episode of Strong Mind and Body, we'll look at how to limit the effects of acid reflux. Let's hear from Gina Marie with this report.
Welcome to Strong Mind and Body. I'm Gina Marie. Acid reflux can turn a great meal with loved ones into a nightmare. The burning sensation can suck the joy from a meal. It can take you away from those memorable summer nights. There are only a few short months to enjoy seasonal cookouts, and you want to make the most of them. Heartburn can be treated naturally, it just takes a little work. But for the most part, it's pretty easy. Here are some ways you can avoid heartburn and make the most of summer meals with family and friends. Number 1, eat less. One of the easiest and most controllable ways to control heartburn is to slow down. A major cause of heartburn is that people eat too much, too fast. By slowing down, enjoying your food, and allowing the body to adequately respond and adapt to food intake, you can reduce the risk of heartburn. Number 2, chew gum. Chewing gum can be a quick and effective way of relieving a bout of acid reflux. Research indicates that gum can reduce acid in the esophagus, especially when it contains bicarbonate. Number 3, avoid certain foods. Fatty and greasy foods can contribute to acid reflux, as can spice. If you are at a cookout or eating greasy food, be sure to pick at it sparingly. You'd be better off filling your plate with more vegetables and leaner cuts of meat. Number 4, consider your bedtime. There is conflicting evidence on whether or not this works, but eating too close to bedtime may stimulate acid reflux. It could be the position of the body that brings it on. If you experience heartburn when you are in bed, try to avoid eating within 3 hours of bedtime. Number 5, don't move too fast. Eating a meal right before playing with the grandkids isn't a good idea. Give yourself about 30 to 45 minutes after a meal before moving too quickly to help avoid acid reflux. And number 6, ease up on the alcohol. Another culprit for acid reflux is drinking alcohol excessively. Try to cut back and only drink in moderation. Don't let acid reflux hold you back from enjoying all the great times. Be smart, keep things under control, and have fun.
And that's it this week for NTD News Today. You can catch NTD Evening News tonight at 6:30 p.m. Eastern. Have a great weekend and see you next week.
at 6:30 p.m. Find your local NTD channel at ntd.com/TV.